from Draymond Green. Green and James join at each other while play continues. LeBron James and Seth. His opponent is down. Draymond steps on him.
And then Draymond, he headlocked Gobert.
He has to be suspended.
Oh, man.
Well, that's going to be a flagrant.
Draymond Green, in a recent game against the Magic, was ejected for the fourth time this season, amongst it a couple of suspensions. There's no doubt that Draymond has been an irreplaceable piece in the Warriors dynasty. His all-time great defensive load for the defensively elite Warriors teams and elite playmaking as ultimately the team's point guard were all but essential to his 4 rings. Yet it's been far from smooth sailing. Draymond's edge for the game and competitiveness that are so essential to the Warriors' DNA has often crossed a line, mitigating the highs of the rings with deconstructing lows that may have ultimately cost them a ring or two. So whilst this video will focus on the alter ego of Draymond, I want it to be known that he was, and still is, a cornerstone piece to this team that without him, they definitely wouldn't have 4 banners hanging in the rafters. Throughout his early playing career, Draymond was profiled as not really good at anything in particular, but he was also greatly undersized for the forward positions and didn't have the athleticism to run with the wings. But what made him an NBA prospect were the intangibles. His lack of physically gifted tools forced him to carry an edge, a competitiveness that made others around him better and propelled himself into NBA conversations without a so-called bag. But in college or high school he had never crossed a line. In fact, he was fondly remembered as a Michigan State great, his number retired and even giving back millions of dollars to the program.
He's an incredible winner. You know, everybody says harder worker, harder this, harder that, I don't know, but he wins.
So come the NBA draft, he was drafted to the Warriors at pick 35, where he would carry his edge and competitiveness to the NBA and would land his first victim on Christmas Day in 2013. It was known that the Clippers and Warriors did not like each other, and the exuberant Green off the bench in his second year couldn't control himself, landing an elbow on Blake Griffin and getting himself ejected. A coward act as described by Blake Griffin. But honestly, outside of that, whilst Draymond was earning his stripes in the league, he stayed out of trouble. Minus a couple of supposed dirty plays, he had no ejections, no suspensions, nothing but predominantly good basketball. And come the 2016 playoffs, the Warriors were playing good basketball and Draymond was recognised as one of the best defenders in the league and an essential playmaking hub for a dynamic Warriors team. But entering the 2016 playoffs, the image of Draymond Green was about to change for good. His first incident would come in Game 3 of the second round against the Rockets. He tackled Michael Beasley to the floor in an act of frustration, having previously lost him the game on a turnover just prior. He was given a flagrant foul, but we move. Nothing that dirty or significant to go on about. However, what is important to note is that a player must serve a 1-game suspension every time they accrue more than 3 flagrant foul points. For most, this isn't something to worry about, but the Warriors were poised for a deep run, and Draymond Green was slowly becoming a menace. So we meet back with Draymond a month later, where he'd inadvertently knee Steven Adams in the breadbasket. An accident or a well-executed shot? Well, 4 days later,
On Adams. And he is fouled. And down goes Adams. It's the leg, guys. Watch the leg.
fans called for action, pleading for Draymond to be suspended, believing Draymond had crossed the line between aggressive basketball and dirty basketball. Instead, to the displeasure of fans, the foul was upgraded to a flagrant 2. I mean, admittedly, this is a light penalty in what looked like a suspendable offence, considering his kick literally 4 days ago. But anyway, it's hard to ignore that Draymond has been granted a leash of leniency not synonymous with league standards. The tough guy gets more leniency and can make more tough plays, sure. But now Draymond had 3 flagrant points, and 1 more offence would garner a suspension. So the world knew that he had to tread water carefully. But Draymond was never going to back down. He was going to play his own way. And so the Warriors entered Game 4 of the NBA Finals up 2-1. Draymond playing arguably the best basketball of his entire career. Tensions were at all-time high between the 2 elite teams, and the Warriors found themselves up 10 with 3 minutes to go. the game was seamlessly over, but LeBron and Draymond tussled mid-screen, LeBron walking over Draymond, and as we'd come to understand, Draymond couldn't resist himself. He again targeted the breadbasket of James and received a series-changing flagrant foul. Fans around the world could admit this in itself was a soft flagrant foul, but ultimately in conjunction with his cheap shots on Steven Adams that rendered no suspension, this one was colour. So the crucial Draymond Green had been suspended for Game 5, with the Warriors up 3-1. And the Warriors, well...
As Cleveland forces a Game 6, as the NBA Finals will return to Cleveland on Thursday night.
Absence of Draymond Green, what role did it play in this game?
It played a huge role. Draymond Green should have played in Game 5 tonight. They should be ashamed of themselves for suspending somebody for such an innocuous situation that occurred in Game 4.
And there's the buzzer. Game 7, Sunday night in Oakland. It's over! It's over! Cleveland is a city of champions once again!
Game 5 had proven to be the crucial turning point in the series. At home, with all the momentum, the question remains, without the Draymond suspension, do the Warriors win the series? Whilst we will never know, Draymond himself takes the blame for the loss.
I take that on the chin. I cost us a championship. I'm fine with that. I can take that on the chin. Would I do it again? 1000%.
He just wouldn't get himself into the position where that play was suspension worthy by not committing the prior 2 flagrant fouls. But as all a part of the Cavs' plan, a special focus was put on aggravating the hot-headed Green, the first team to tap into the alter ego of Draymond. And it clearly worked. Amongst a career year, Draymond will forever have to live with the consequences of his actions in Game 4, and the entire 2016 playoffs. And it continued into the next year. He had kicked and elbowed James Harden, and literally 2 days later, if the first one wasn't enough, he kicked Marquise Chris's hand, causing it to dislocate to the side. I mean, that's as unnatural as it gets. This dude can't keep his legs to himself. I mean, he has a history of repeated offences. The incident coming legit a day after mocking the league office of their perception on his kicks. But anyway, when it mattered most come playoff time, fueled from the unprecedented collapse in last year's NBA Finals, Draymond seemed to have turned a corner. He had held the Game 4 incident closely, detailing it as a big night in my life. It's something that changed me. It's something that woke me up. As he vowed to never make the same mistake twice. And he was holding that up for now. He would finally receive the elusive DPOI that he was chasing.
Thank you.
And go 16-1 in the playoffs to claim his second ring, doing it having caused no major issues or fights. Claiming this coveted second ring in Game 5, the crucial game he had missed in the finals last year. A full circle moment for Green. He was doing the seemingly impossible, retaining the intensity that helped fuel them all, while avoiding the recklessness that once sparked their unprecedented demise. Draymond Green was still going to be himself, that'll never change, but the reckless acts looked to have faded out of his game. For now. Going into the next year, having had only 3 ejections in the first 5 seasons, in the 2017-18 season, well, Draymond had 3 in itself. Albeit none of which were particularly outrageous, and the Warriors had one of the most stacked teams ever. So even without Draymond, they had a net rating of 12.5, which was league best by a mile, and were 2-1 in games he was ejected in. With or without him in games, they were going to win. But PTSD kicked in for fans in Game 2 of the first round, when Draymond got a flagrant 1 after shoving Bertans to the floor. And in the most Draymond way ever, he celebrated the missed technical free throw.
Draymond has to be so much more careful.
Life goes on. More important things in life than worry about a flagrant point.
And he was right. Well, Draymond did claim his first eye poke of his career, at least he'll add to in the remaining years, as he poked LeBron in the eye in Game 1 of the finals. Intentional or not, you tell me. Perhaps lucky to evade another flagrant foul, it ultimately wouldn't have had any impact, as Draymond had controlled his competitiveness through most of the playoffs, sweeping the Cavs to his 3rd ring. For the next year, Draymond's antics would begin to affect his own teammates. Ironic that the Super Team Warriors' first troubles would not be from the Rockets or the Cavs, but but their own internal bleeding. In the beginnings of the 2018-19 season, Draymond would get into it with Kevin Durant, who barked at Green for not getting him the ball in the final seconds, who pounded a team chair as he rebuked the team's DPOI. Draymond firing back saying, "Who the fuck are you talking to?" Green then went on to make it clear he's been making plays for years, reminding Durant the Warriors were winning before he showed up, then scolding Durant about how he has handled free agency, keeping his options open and keeping the story alive, consuming the Warriors and their season with talk of what Durant will do next. And Durant never seemed to have recovered from the incident.
I don't recall the answer to this question. Did that play a role in you leaving Golden State?
A little bit, yeah, for sure.
Draymond was fined and suspended as a result, having crossed a line with his profanity and choice words. Ultimately, the two believe the issue never got resolved within the team, leaving it an easy choice for Durant to depart in the offseason. It was largely consensus that Draymond's views around Durant's handling of his free agency were shared, but there's no doubt that the way he expressed them was clearly inappropriate, as he should have kept it internal. As the season progressed, however, Draymond would add to his eye-poking list as it became a new area of target. He would poke Harden in the eye in Game 2 and follow it up in their next game with another eye poke, this one way more egregious. I mean, he literally has a history of repeat offences back to back. And if it wasn't obvious enough already, he had the entire basketballing world against him, minus Warriors fans of course. The Warriors would ultimately fall short in the big dance with injuries to Clay and Durant, but Green played some of his best basketball. Well, the next season was much of a write-off. Steph injured, Clay injured, Draymond was doing his best to get himself out of games, ejecting himself 3 times through the year, and not for the first or last time, Kerr criticised Green's inability to keep his cool.
No, we needed him in the second half. We missed him out there.
It also began a trend in ejections, where Draymond finds himself out of games most often when Steph isn't playing. The next year was only the one altercation for Draymond, but also one of his most costly. Simply put, the Warriors weren't good enough to afford the Draymond antics anymore, and so a last-second ejection.
You have a 2-point lead. You can't get a technical. Draymond's ejected. Now, is this a two technicals? We're going to get two free throws?
Would erase their lead and lose them the game. Admittedly, Draymond takes accountability, as he always does, as knowing the person who he is today, it should have never happened, even stating it bothered him more than Game 5 in the NBA Finals, because he had complete control. You're not getting that ring back, Draymond. But anyway, the following year, well, he would keep his cool, but a late season ejection would keep up his streak of yearly ejections, because it wouldn't be a complete season without Dre getting ejected at least once, right? Ooh, and playoffs started and we got our yearly eye poke. This time, Nikola Jokic the recipient. I'd love to believe these are accidental, because they kind of look like it, right? But when you have a history of eye poking, I can't believe I'm saying that, a history of eye poking, it's hard not to believe these are in some way intentional. We now entered Game 1 of the second round, and the Draymond antics had started again. He was ejected for this hard foul on Brandon Clark. Admittedly, however, this was a harsh ejection, considering he didn't excessively pull him down, instead trying to lessen his landing. Maybe a flagrant one more appropriate.
If I didn't do this, he's just jumping and my hand is up. It's all good though.
Either way, the antics hadn't proved costly, as they found themselves in the NBA Finals, where Draymond was of course riding a fine line, like an extremely fine line. In Game 2 he received a tech for bulldozing Grant Williams. I mean, this dude's playing football. And 20 minutes later, he put his feet over Jaylen Brown and flared up with him. Fans despised at him, not receiving a second technical and being ejected.
I'm glad he got their legs on the top of your head. And then he tried to pull my pants down. I don't know what that was about, but that's what Draymond Green does.
For any other player and in any other moment, that's an automatic second technical, let's be real. But for Draymond, this is where he wanted to be on the edge. And unlike 2016, he wasn't close to a suspension and could afford a degree of recklessness. For the series though, Draymond was poor. His defense was consistent, yet offensive woes made him unplayable down the stretch. even getting benched in Game 4. Despite it bruising the Hall of Famer's ego, timely defensive stops and a strong closeout game rendered him useful in claiming ring number 4.
I don't like to put a number on things and say, oh man, we can get 5 or we can get 6. Or no, we're going to get them until the wheels fall off.
The walls hadn't fallen off and didn't look like falling off. The big three weren't going anywhere, and key young pieces like Jordan Poole and Kuminga were only getting better. But Draymond's next move was perhaps dynasty ending.
Sources tell ESPN that Warriors star forward Draymond Green threw a punch at fellow teammate Jordan Poole.
Never wish to see that.
And I just never think it needs to get to that point.
He got to go to the pool and fix that, if he want to fix it.
The punch heard around the world, discussed, dissected, deconstructed by everyone in the media. It originally surfaced as a physical altercation, but the video was soon leaked by a member of staff, subjecting Green to unforeseen scrutiny. Shockingly, Draymond wasn't suspended by the Warriors for his actions. Mind-blowing, considering he was suspended for much less for his incident with Durant. We then got our Last Chance documentary. I mean, jokes aside, this was kinda weird. A documentary by Green released just before ring night that made it sound like he was on the end of the punch. He echoed that,
like, the world has seen one of your worst moments. Look at the upside.
Yet through the year, the world wasn't buying much Draymond stock. There was a clear rift between him and Poole, as he gave up on a play 6 months after the incident when Poole didn't pass the ball.
For Draymond, that was an oddity.
And 2 weeks later, he was suspended for a game. Not for the punch, but for bouncing the ball off Westbrook's head and receiving his 16th technical of the year, triggering an automatic suspension. I want it to be known that Draymond was still just as important to the team as he'd ever been. Without him on the floor, the Warriors had a negative 7.3 net rating, equivalent to the 4th worst that year. Yet, that was the dilemma. Draymond was too essential to the Warriors' offensive system and defensive capabilities to trade, but his continued antics had clearly stained the defending champs. And playoffs begin and Draymond's back.
The board. Green gets Sabonis is down. Draymond steps on him.
You got to do something far more flagrant than this to be suspended.
But in this case, he should not have been suspended. I mean, you got to be kidding.
The world can agree Draymond's ejection was fair, but considering Sabonis' hold on his ankle, a suspension might have been a bit harsh. But again, considering Draymond's egregious list of offences, no one was surprised to see him suspended for a game. Many probably rooting for more. But ultimately, if he was able to control his emotions, he wouldn't be putting the league into a position to make these decisions. Again, Draymond's antics came to the cost of the team, but honestly, he just loves to play the villain. In spite of this, the Warriors would win the series, but fall to the Lakers in the following round. Poole had played a terrible series, averaging 8 points in only 20 minutes, having been an integral piece to a championship run in the previous year. Whilst Jordan must take the blame for his play, it's no coincidence that his dip in form correlates in time with Draymond's punch, admitting that he couldn't be there for Poole during his slumps, and that's your team leader.
Had I not done that, the relationship we had, I could have been there for him. I could have carried him through that.
Right.
Wasn't necessarily able to do that once everything happened.
Anytime some trust is lost, then it makes the process much more difficult. And there was some trust lost, and that's as blunt as I can be.
But if there's anything we know about Draymond, he's really good at pointing out his mistakes, but not correcting them. And you'll see in the next year. After Poole was traded and the Warriors adding some new pieces, Draymond was supposedly ready for contention, but he had his sights on record-breaking ejection pace. 7 games in, getting his first ejection of the year, as he celebrates his ejection as if he's won a ring. But anyway, 3 days later, on the 14th of November 2023, Draymond gets his revenge. Him and Rudy Gobert have been going back and forth for years. In 2019, Gobert cried after being snubbed for the All-Star game, Draymond responding, asking if he should cry too. The two would go back and forth for a while about being a better defender, but things got spicy when Draymond punched Poole and Gobert tweeted, "Insecurity is always loud." I mean, that's grade A trolling. But of course Green didn't forget, and when Gobert punched a teammate mid-game, he would of course copy his tweet. So of course when a brawl started between the Wolves and the Warriors, Draymond didn't even need to see what happened. He said, "I got Gobert."
The league has to make a statement.
The tide is kind of turning here where players, they know he's a 4-time champion, he is a future Hall of Famer, he's one of the best defenders in the history of the game, he's a genius on the basketball court. The rest of the league is getting tired.
You'd think after everything he's done, he'd acknowledge the impact of his suspension on the team. But no.
I take pride in being a good teammate.
Bit ironic to say that you did it for the team after last year. But anyway, back from 2 ejections and a 5-game suspension, having let his team down multiple times as they went 2-3 without him. Well, first game back and Draymond was consumed by his own intensity again. Things don't change. No matter what was transpiring around him, Green spent over a minute carrying on about Monk's palming of the ball that wasn't called. Even after being pulled from the game, he continually went on about it on the bench. With the game on the line, here Green was so emotionally twisted in the moment, the micro, that he forgot to consider the macro, the long-term ramifications of his actions. The more surprising part was that Green was so comfortable being this level of extra even after 2 ejections and a suspension that already made life so unnecessarily hard on this team this season. The Warriors would go on to lose the game in heartbreaking fashion, and Draymond would lock in for 4 games until he then did the inexcusable.
Personally, I feel like that brother needed help.
Repercussions have to follow.
This desire to see Draymond Green punished.
This is about player safety.
This was the pinnacle of his antics, a tipping point for him and the Warriors. Whilst other actions can be justified to an extent with excuses, this was just inexcusable, and Green had let the entire organisation down, as he's done time and time again. It never ends with him. Fans expectedly attacked him, whilst players actually consoled him. Well, I'm sure they enjoyed doing it. Nurkic dropping a generational meme template, and Gobert out of everyone having empathy for him, as Green is somebody that's not well inside and suffering. I'm sure he enjoyed that. And Durant even chiming in and saying,
I hope Draymond gets the help he needs. It's been incident after incident.
His coach even agreeing that the indefinite suspension was fair, an opportunity for him to make a change in his approach and life. It was clear, jokes aside, that this incident was bigger than basketball, and Draymond needed to seriously look at himself in the mirror, because he can't keep approaching the game this way. So now, the wobbling Warriors, currently 10-13, and stuck in 11th place, were without their second most important player for a large chunk of time, and the man getting paid $22 million a year had cost his team again. His absence a killer for a team that can't get any sustained rhythm. A month later, he would reveal the darkness he faced during the suspension.
I just told him, Adam, it's too much for me. Like, it's too much. Like, this is too much. It's all becoming too much for me. And I'm going to retire.
Yeah, that didn't go well for fans. And I get it. But ultimately, I don't know mentally what he was going on with, so it's hard to make a comment. And as we came to expect, he'd apologise and take accountability again.
And I can get rid of the antics.
Yeah, alright mate. It's frustrating because anyone that has watched Draymond talk or play, he's so smart. One of the most high IQ players. But he keeps getting himself in these positions that honestly, apology is only as good as the change in behaviour. But finally, after the apologies, Draymond was back and had the chance to stick to his word.
I've cost my team enough.
And it was easy to remember what the Warriors were missing. Since his return, they are 22-13 and are a top 6 defense, single-handedly fueled by Draymond, who without the antics would probably be in DPOY discussion, as the Warriors had a bottom 4 defense before his return. That's how good he is on that side of the ball, not to mention the Warriors were more fluid offensively. He's an indispensable ceiling raiser. But 2 months later, in a game against the Magic, he was ejected for the 4th time.
Draymond's got to be careful here.
Say his piece. He got another tag.
AJ's gone.
That's a huge blow.
Admittedly, this isn't as violent or aggressive as his previous incidents, but he had again let his team down, and seeing Steph Curry cry after the ejection hit me differently. I mean, it's obvious he knows the impact of Draymond, but his repeated inability to stay on the floor has clearly taken its toll.
We need him.
He knows that. We all know that.
I saw a comment from Herb K on The Athletic, and I think it's really good. The Warriors need Green's talent on the court to stay ahead of OKC on one hand. On the other hand, he's a human being with a long-standing, self-sustaining problem, not entirely unlike an addiction, which is going to repeat even as he shows progress. Change is a process and doesn't occur overnight. Whilst it's easy for us to see his actions as black and white, it's clear that Draymond has had an internal problem and it showed some progress since the Nurkic year. On the other hand, Green has had a long-standing history of dirty plays and costly antics, so it's understandable for fans to be completely fed up with his actions, costing his team time and time again as he's consistently portraying himself as the villain of the NBA to fans. But it's honestly sad to see that a Hall of Fame legacy as one of the all-time great defenders is slowly tarnishing under his own misdoing. Pure recklessness, mental illness, or a combination of both.